Victor Gao, thank you so much for joining me on Head to Head this evening here in London.
Thank you for having me.
China has upped its military spending. It's expanding its nuclear arsenal. It now has the biggest navy in the world. Chinese President Xi Jinping has said that the country's military should be capable of, quote, fighting and winning wars, and told the military to focus all your energy on fighting, improve your capability to win. Victor, who do you want to fight and who do you want to win against?
First of all, the Chinese military spending is the second largest in the world, but it is only a fraction of that of the United States. And China has a very difficult geopolitical situation. China has 14 land neighboring countries altogether and 6 maritime nations for China. Therefore, China's defensive in nature, is not for fighting anyone except those who want to invade China or to launch a war against China. China's military spending is for peace rather than war, and war will be forced upon China, and China need to fight back.
You say it's for peace, but your neighbors don't agree. Your neighbors are pretty worried about you. You go through the list. Japan has sounded the alarm, saying your military buildup is very serious concern to them. India is worried about China on its border. And the Philippines president has warned that China is becoming a more pronounced and worrisome threat, he says. Those are the elected governments of countries representing over 1.6 billion people in Asia. This is not the United States, this is not the West, these are your Asian neighbors saying, we're worried about China.
Maybe you mentioned 3 of the neighboring countries of China. Let's talk about each of them very quickly. Japan unconditionally surrendered not only to the United States, but also to China in 1945. And if you read very carefully the unconditional surrender document that Japan signed, then you will know how Japan needs to conduct its foreign affairs as well as its military troops with China and with all those countries that Japan unconditionally surrendered for. India is a great nation, and there is a territorial dispute between China and India, but that dispute was not created by China, neither was it created by India. It was created or left behind by the British Indian government.
That's a great history lesson. But right now, China, in 2024, the defense spending is going up by 7%, the most for 5 years. You've had 29 consecutive years of military expenditure growth, the most of any country in the world. Since 2022, China has increased military drills around Taiwan. It's escalated since the new Taiwanese president was inaugurated in May. China is not a fan of him. Since then, there's been almost daily activity involving China's warships, drones, cyber attacks against Taiwan. China is getting ready to invade Taiwan, isn't it?
There is only one China. Taiwan is part of China, and the government of the People's Republic of China is the sole legitimate government for the totality of China. The exact status between the two sides of the Taiwan Strait is the unfinished civil war back in 1949. So ever since the beginning of the 1980s, China does not want to use a war to solve this unification problem.
You don't want to use a war, but you're surrounding it with ships, drones, cyber attacks, and making lots of threats.
Each time when the separatists in Taiwan want to push the edge of the envelope, they will come across more and more demonstration of the commitment of the Chinese nation to eventually achieve peaceful reunification or otherwise. That's the litmus test.
Your defense minister said anyone who dares to pursue independence for Taiwan will be crushed into pieces and face destruction. Sounds like a truly peaceful guy.
That's a real statement, because if the separatists really want to push the edge of the envelope with the aid of some big country, for example, which wants to use Taiwan as a proxy in its own geopolitical rivalry against China, then wait until you see what will happen. Reunification will be achieved, and China is the only permanent member of the United Nations Security Council which has not yet achieved a complete reunification.
Well, I'm always amused with this phrase, reunification. And why this obsession with Taiwan? You are a country of 3.7 million square miles, a population 60 times that of Taiwan, economy 20 times the size of Taiwan. Why are you obsessed with Taiwan? Why not just leave them be?
In terms of defending China's sovereignty and territorial integrity, any inch of land is not 1 inch too much. Any one single person is not one person too many. So we need to achieve reunification.
Even though they don't want to be part of your country. 12% of the people of Taiwan say they want to reunify with China. 12%. You can't get more unpopular than that in that.
Mehdi, it's not up to the people in Taiwan to decide about the one China policy.
You're very blunt in your disregard for people's views, freedoms, dignity. You say you don't care about what they think. You also said in an interview with the French newspaper Le Monde, once we get the island back, we'll have to ask everyone's origins. Those who have Japanese ancestry, who you basically say constitute 10% of the population, will have to pledge loyalty to reunification in writing. Otherwise, we'll have to help them leave. You're basically calling for the ethnic cleansing of 2.3 million people in Taiwan.
No, you remember back in 1945, when Japan unconditionally surrendered, a lot of people in Taiwan who originally came from Japan, they were the rulers of Taiwan at the time, they stayed behind because of the magnanimity of the Chinese nation. Now, several decades later, they account for about 10% of the local population in Taiwan. Now, if you really do your homework, you will realize that those die-hard Taiwanese separatists include many of these Japanese Chinese.
But okay. Well, but you would get rid of them. You would get rid of 2.3 million people.
No, after the reunification, everyone in Taiwan needs to make a pledge whether they acknowledge there is only one China and Taiwan is part of China.
And if they don't make that pledge, they're out.
Those who pledge for the one China policy, they are local
citizens. By the way, you didn't say everyone. You said of Japanese descent. That is literally ethnic cleansing. You're picking people by their ethnic heritage, making them do a loyalty test. Otherwise, they have to get out of the country they've lived in.
It is not a loyalty test. Here, for example, in Britain, if you are a British citizen, you need to support the monarchy. You cannot say,
I'm standing in Britain. I don't support the monarchy. I don't like King Charles.
No, you cannot say. No,
I just said it.
Mehdi,
I literally just said it.
You cannot take any action to oppose the monarchy system.
But I don't have to sign a pledge saying I support King Charles.
Well, each country is different. We are talking about China.
China is very different.
And China has one policy which is part of the constitution.
Which involves threatening people in Taiwan who don't want to be part of your country. Let's bring in our panel who are waiting to come in and join. Let's see what they think. I'm joined by Stephen Chan, professor at the University of London School of Oriental and African Studies. If you're in Taiwan today, how worried are you about a looming invasion?
I'm not in Taiwan today. I'm going to be visiting next year. I've been there 5 times in all of the great cities of Taiwan. And what I've noticed most conspicuously is that nobody I've talked to wants to rejoin or reunify with China because of their sense of freedom and their sense of self-determination. So I think that if you're going to say our sovereignty matters more than your desire for your own self-determination and freedom, then you're doing something that will not make you popular in Taiwan, and you won't win the argument for Chinese sovereignty over the island.
Martin Jakes is here with us, author of the best-selling book, When China Rules the World. Martin, you've said in the past that China should not be seen through a solely Western lens. So I agree with you, and there's issues there. But I began the show by asking Victor about Japan and India and the Philippines, separate to Taiwan, just the issues in the region. Do you think China is responsible for some of those issues, all of those issues, none of those issues?
Well, China's obviously involved inevitably in all of those issues. I think that actually, if you look at the rise of China over the last 30, 40 years, spectacular, biggest change we've ever seen in history, really. And inevitably, that is changing everything in the region, in the world. But the remarkable thing, I'd say, Mehdi, about China's rise is how you quoted the military figures and so on. But China has not fought any wars since 1979. If you compare that with America, Europe, Japan, at the same stage of development, they were extremely aggressive.